This heart and this mind understand through the blossoms. Take this begging bowl. For one heading east, a parting gift by Matsuo Basho. A haiku. Welcome, welcome. Hello. It's been a few extra days, a few more days than usual since I've streamed, and I am very happy to be alive as always. Hello, Leon. It has been it has been some time, I think, since you've been around on stream. So welcome, and Nikki. Hello, Sleepy Librarian. Hello, Classics. Hello. We've been Ginny deprived, I suppose so. But for arguably a good reason. And that reason being, I taught a poetry workshop and I had a jazz gig, and I've been very busy with lots of very good things, and I'm I'm incredibly happy that I got to do all that stuff. It's kind of crazy to me that I was like in a room teaching people about poetry, having just turned 22, and there are probably people in that room who've been like writing poetry for that long, right? For as long as I'd been alive, and people seemed to want to listen to the things I had to say, um, and that was really cool. It was like the best. So I said to them, it was the best birthday gift ever to be able to teach, right? I smell imposter syndrome. No, I mean like, uh, it really is kind of fascinating to me because I have only been writing poetry at all for 3 years. I've only been talking about poetry and like analyzing and teaching in this way for 2 years, and that doesn't make what I'm saying any less valuable. But I think it's really special to me that like I have something to say, and I have something that people want to hear. Right? It's really cool, and that's really exciting. And I learned some really cool things at the other workshops about performance, about slam poetry, about uh, all sorts of things. I just feel like being around other poets who are all very, serious about their writing and their art was an incredibly inspiring thing because it was this 3 day poetry festival. I'm wearing the shirt, the Phenomenal Woman Poetry Festival, by Spotlight Poetry, um, and it was like 3 days. Went to some workshops, learned some things, saw um, an amazing. I watched 2 bouts of the actual slam poetry, like preliminary rounds, and man, people are like really incredible performers. And then they had an amazing like headlining poet who did a performance and a little Q&A. And I'm trying to find her name. I think it was um, maybe maybe I'll just find it. Jessica Salgado was her name, and she was an absolutely incredible performer and poet. Were there any men? There were some men in attendance, but all. So the point of the festival was all of the slam participants were women or non-binary or femme presenting. All of the workshop people were also femme presenting, whatever. So including myself, right? And and there were men in attendance. There were some, But it was a women led and women dominated space, which is really unusual in slam poetry, and I mean most spaces in general. So that was pretty cool. So I attended like some panels where people were talking about their experiences and stuff, and um, it's nice because since I taught a workshop, I got like a badge to attend the whole festival for free, and they paid me. I guess they haven't paid me yet, but they will pay me, and uh, it's just awesome, really cool. And if they do it next year, I'll probably try to be involved again, um, in whatever way I can, because they're like a great organization. I've been writing poetry longer than you've been alive, and definitely value your opinion and outlook. I appreciate that, Nikki. That's very kind. Yeah, I I appreciate that. Yeah, and I gave my workshop, and it went really well, and I taught people about feedback and analysis and the things that I do all the time on stream. I was able to sell like 4 zines, which is super cool. Which that's always awesome. Uh, it was just great. I'm just really happy and stoked about all of that. And the coolest thing really to me is that by preparing a workshop about all of the things that I've sort of been coming to learn on stream, by analyzing, by codifying all of this information into like a single, you know, uh, hour and a half long workshop, I ended up teaching myself a lot of things. And I feel like now, as I go back into analyzing people's poems, as we're going to be doing today, uh, I feel like I have all these like new ideas and new approaches, and it's not necessarily things that I didn't know, but by by sort of formalizing everything into like a method, um, a loose and interpretive method, nothing strict. Um, I sort of rediscovered things about poetry, about analysis, about reading, and I think this will really uh, help me, right? And it's cool, right? I didn't quite expect that uh, by writing a workshop, by preparing a workshop, I would also teach myself. But that's what's happened. So I'm actually really really excited to read some poetry today. Welcome in, Undine. Hello. You were amongst the many people here who have submitted things to be read. Um, I do wonder, um, which of y'all have things submitted? If y'all tell me, uh, advocate for yourselves or something. Yell at me and say, "Hey, I've had this thing in chat for 10 weeks. Please read it." That kind of thing. I know that Sleepy Librarian, yeah, you you submitted something, right? Um, and then I think Undying, you've had some things. You have In Lieu of Flowers. Um, oh, we also have Elias's poem, which like we unfinished. We didn't really get into on a previous stream. So we'll definitely want to do that if Elias shows up. Um, we read Numb. We read Numb. So I think we'll do In Lieu of Flowers if you're around, Undyne, for some amount of time and would like me to read that. I think that's maybe the one we're gonna do. I think that seems good, right? Yep. Cool. Awesome. I'm like just really excited about poetry and stuff. So I think we're just gonna really quickly jump right into it. Because man, poetry's awesome, you know. um, I yeah, I think the whole poetry festival and workshop thing was a great reminder of like how much I I like poetry and how much I like all this stuff and I don't know, community and all of that. So I'm just really stoked to be doing stuff and I'm screenshotting this poem to put it onto the thing and then we'll read it and it'll be great. Um yeah, and I also had the music gig playing jazz, got paid to play music, which might actually be the first time I've ever been paid to play music. No, yeah. I mean, like, the punk band doesn't really count because we just kind of put, like, the small amount of money we got into, like, the band fund. Um, it's been a good weekend. That's what I'm trying to say. It was my good week, right? Birthday, gig, um, poetry workshop. You know, life's good. Life's good. And life is good because we're doing poetry, and I'm just yapping and trying to kill this time while I put this poem onto my iPad so that we can read it. Where did it go? Oh my uh dude, technology's difficult sometimes. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. My daughter says she likes your bandana. Thank you. It is hot in Las Vegas, and that means it is officially like keep my hair back and out of my face. It is bandana weather. I have this one, I have a red one, I have a blue one, I have like a kind of blue and black scarf that is like art from a local painter that I got that scarf that's really cool, and I do that in my hair. And then I was actually just given like another sort of scarf bandana thing, which is blue and white. Um, and I have some fabric around. I have a lot of fabric around and some old clothes and stuff. And if any of them are the right shape and size, I might try to turn some other stuff into more bandanas because I really like how my hair looks like this. So that we may be seeing a lot of that, a lot of bandanas on my head, I guess. Is that straight? That looks somewhat straight. I'll zoom in a little bit. In lieu of flowers. That's a good an evocative title. I like in lieu. I've been saying in lieu again for like maybe like 3 months now. It's just like a good phrase that I'm happy to have back in my general day-to-day lexicon. Really love it as a phrase on its own. And Mr. Aegis, I will ask you if you have any um opening thoughts on this poem. I know you've already provided the context of some Bible verses that you were referencing in this poem. But if you have any things you would like me to look into this poem, any opening sort of questions or direction or things you want to guide me in some way, please do share. And either way, whether you have something or you don't, we will be jumping into this poem in lieu of flowers. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down, while wicked, sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. there's like sound stuff happening. Open graves, golden sins. Okay, poem. Read the poem. They starve martyrs while the heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Hell's gaping maw it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside. Lives of comfort, lives of ease, their reward they have received. Mourn not evil when judgment comes. For your children they'd have none. Turn hearts toward the low instead, and with bare feet on vipers tread. In lieu of flowers. One question is if the religious references are too overt, or if the long lines don't flow well enough. Yeah, we have these two longer lines in the opening stanza that definitely stick out, right? Just from like a visual perspective. We have this very similar length, consistent poem, and then we have these guys jutting out. But, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't flow or they don't feel good within the poem. Right? And the other thing we can talk about is all of this religiosity, right? How does the religious stuff feel? Does it feel too overt? Does it feel not overt enough? Does it feel good, forced? You know, all of these kinds of words. We can certainly talk about that. Those are good places to start, and flow is always a fun thing to talk about. And this poem has lots of things that make it want to flow, right? We have all these we have this like kind of loose verse feel going on. We have the rhymes. We have some like really nice alliteration and assonant things happening within lines. So flow is definitely something that this poem, right, seems to care about, even just on a first read. But I'd like a second read before I say anything too specific. And maybe I won't stop in the middle of the first stanza this time. In lieu of flowers, poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down, while wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. They starve martyrs while the heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Hell's gaping maw, it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside. Lives of comfort, lives of ease, their reward they have received. Mourn not evil when judgment comes, for your children they'd have none. Turn hearts toward the low instead, and with bare feet on vipers tread. In lieu of flowers. So, you're interested in talking about flow here, and something that just really sticks out to me, that's the first thing that stuck out to me in this poem, is a lot of the flow stuff, a lot of the sound, a lot of the really nice turns of phrase that kind of propel us through this poem. And I think, like, really in these two longer lines, right, this is where a lot of it sticks out to me, right? While wicked, sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. Send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. There are so many, like, sonic things happening here, right? While wicked, I mean, we can just like do all the colors. While wicked, right? Wah, wah. And then we have Icked, sickly. So we have this like ick rhyme basically. I mean, it's not an end word. It's assonant and it's alliterative, I guess. And then this I in sickly and wicked goes into grins, right? While wicked sickly grins of every sickly every, right? So we're having like this rhyme here of every soulless prince, while wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince. And like this sort of W alliteration shifts into this like kind of thing, and then we keep the I in prince. Soulless, right? Basically every word here is like connecting in some way to something else, right? Even like the of and the soulless is o sound is fairly close, right? And there are just some really nice sounds going on, right? While wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send, so we're kind of carrying that alliteration through, the meek to open graves. Send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. And this line's kind of cool because it doesn't have this like quite the same like density of sound things going on, but it has this really nice like not parallel, like symmetrical structure, right? Where we have this open graves, golden sins, this send, drench, right? Where these words very strongly like kind of call to each other sonically, right? Send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. And open graves, golden sins, it like I don't know, it's so good. I feel like for some reason whenever I say golden sins, like I feel like I'm saying like open graves again. They're just so closely sonically connected that I really it's tasty. It's tasty. The mouth feels good there, right? Hi Ray, welcome. Ray, you'll appreciate this. I got a new book, Complete Fiction of Borges. That's all on that, really. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so if I nod off, I apologize. This poem has a nice musicality. No need to apologize. Nodding off on Twitch stream, nodding off in class is entirely allowed here, right? This is the class you can fall asleep in. The religious references are definitely overt. I don't know if I'd say too overt, but it depends on your goal for the poem, right? I mean, that's always a tricky thing, right? What is too much? And we'll get to that in a bit, right? But maybe you can think about that, sleepy librarian, yourself. What makes something too much? What makes something not enough? Those kinds of questions are useful to ask. I think being more of a fiction writer has helped me with coming up with good turns of phrase. That's fascinating. As someone who doesn't write that much fiction, right? And I've always maybe personally had the association that like poets are the ones coming up with like cool things that words do, right? And prose writers are the ones with like the good ideas and the good sort of overarching structural choices. So it's fascinating that you have that perspective on it. But it is certainly true, right, that anytime we're doing different forms of art, different forms of writing, these things are going to help us kind of transfer over to each other, and often in surprising ways. Music and playing music has this incredible effect on my capacity as a performer when I'm reading poetry, or even when I'm streaming and doing this. And it has, some effect on my sense of rhythm and stuff. Poetry deeply impacts the way that I play music, right? The idea of a phrase, the idea of a line. So there's that. Um. So anyway, back to these very musical things going on, right? Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, poor thorns, crowns. Our faces bright, though trodden down. So we also have this, very steady end rhyme thing happening, right? We're doing crowns down, print, sin, burn, turn, might, light, etc. Right? It goes all the way through. We have no variation in this. It's always doing this, at least within the stanza, an A A B B, and then C C D D, right? Um, and and this is nice, right? And I think it helps move us. I always think that end rhymes, right, move us through very well, especially when we have like enjambment that we don't necessarily end a sentence on the end of a line, right? Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down, while wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. And this is a fascinating this first stanza, right? It's a really interesting structural choice to me. Uh, and I don't know how I feel about it yet, but it is certainly something that I don't feel like I've like seen before, where, oftentimes we will create some sort of pattern in our poem, and then we'll subvert this pattern later throughout the poem to create more interest, right? Where we'll have like A, B, A, B, A, B, whatever, and then there's like a C that comes in and changes it. We see this in music where we have like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? To change it, to add something new, to add variation. And in this poem, right, we have these consistent length lines, we have these end rhymes, we have this steady kind of verse, but the variation that we put on it happens in the first stanza, and we don't actually like get a chance to fully establish the pattern of the short lines, kind of establish what's going on before we change it. And I think that's really fascinating, right? It kind of like begins us in this maybe kind of unsteady space in the poem. And I don't think that's bad. I haven't necessarily put any specific thought into what these words are saying and whether this unsteadiness is helpful. But it does have that feeling, right? And these longer lines, I think they move. They want to move. Because we create this poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down. Even these are sort of like split in two. They have this like tiger burning bright kind of feel. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down. Maybe bright being there is part of that. So we have this like these split lines. Da 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 da, right? And then when we get to the third line, while wicked sickly grins, it totally like breaks what we've been doing. Our faces bright though trodden down, ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Sets of four and sets of two, sets of four another set, sets of four, da-dum, da-dum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And then, while wicked sickly grins, bum, 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 we have six. And it feels so different because it's like a line, well, it's like three quarters, right? It's not quite the complete eight, it's more than the two, and it totally like throws off the rhythm. That not necessarily bad, right? It's just that it changes. While wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves, that's seven, while drenched in golden sins. So we have like a 6, 6, 7, 6 happening there. And I think there are like maybe two ways to read this, right? We can like plunge through these long lines. While wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. Right, and these are like really long breaths. These are long extended lines, which gives us this feeling of momentum. Or we can do, while wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. It kind of, I don't know, I think that one definitely feels more unsteady, feels more like surprising when we read it that way. And I think there's something, right? It's a change. And then we come back. We come back to this. They starve martyrs while the heroes burn, half and half. Feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might clothe themselves in blaspheme light, right? We return. And then we're like, okay, this is kind of the regular form. This is the pattern that we're meant to expect here. And it really draws attention to this, right? It really, I think it makes me wonder, like, why this sticks out in this way, because it really does. The unsteadiness stemming from the two different links between the first two lines and second two lines contrasts these two groups of people that are the focus of the poem and their huge divide. Yeah, so this is where, right, if we talk about the meaning of the words, what they're saying, maybe this can help us understand the value of some unsteadiness here and what we're actually talking about, right? Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright, though trodden down, right? So we're speaking to an us, some larger group of people, something more collective, right? Bright, faces bright, we're hopeful though trodden down, right? Those who are the victims of, society, those who are the beaten down, the trodden down, the lesser by some metric, right? But have hope. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns is interesting. We have some like more nuance than just sort of the downtrodden of society. Poor in spirit and thorns for crowns. So thorns for crowns is making a very clear allusion to Jesus from, the Bible. He had crown of thorns on his head when he got crucified. So he's right, like a martyr. Jesus can symbolize like so many things, right? He's a martyr. There's this idea of like redemption. He's this like king, but he's the king of the people, redeemer, like whatever. There's a lot going on. But this is really fascinating contrasted with poor in spirit. Because arguably Jesus is maybe poor materially and rich in spirit, right? He is like the most spirit of anyone with spirit. So we have some nuance here that maybe we'll come to unpack and break down later in the poem. But we are talking about, right, this group of our people. Next lines, while wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince. JC, the main character of the Bible, as we all know, yeah. Send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. So the meek calls to Jesus. He has this whole like spiel. Blessed are the meek is something that gets said in the Bible. So, sending the meek to a grave, right? These are the oppressors, the ones who are making martyrs of the us. These are the wealthy, golden sins, soulless princes, sickly grins. These people are materially wealthy. They are soulless. They are cruel. All of that. right? And like you say, undying, right? The unsteadiness stemming from the two different lengths of lines. It does show, right? It creates a tonal contrast between the first couplet and the second couplet, where poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright, though trodden down, right? It's simple. It like kind of rolls off the tongue well. It's elegant. It's not doing too much. While wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. Right? It expands. It explodes into this larger thing going on. They take up more space, right? They have more words. They are more verbose, more you know, I don't know, the lines themselves, they're greedy in a sense, right? They take up more space. They're drenched in gold. And I like this, right? I think this really does, like you say, create this contrast undying. And as we go forward into the poem, right, one thing that we can ask, that we can think about is, why don't we continue this pattern? Why does it just happen here, right? And maybe in this text we'll find some kind of justification, some kind of thing that relates to that. Or maybe this is just sort of our introduction, right? That shows these people and these people, and then this is, carrying on in a consistent form so that the poem has a steadiness to it. We'll see, right? Bunch of chat messages. Part of it is turning the religious mentality of some people on its head. I think I'd have a hard time to not see this poem as a religious poem due to the abundance of references. Yeah. So if the goal was to write a poem with religious touches in it, I'd say it's too much. Yeah. I mean, this poem is like doing so many overtly religious things, right? And this poem is definitely like a religious poem. It can also be, commentary, and it can say interesting things, and it can break down poem. It's not necessarily that it is like speaking to religion itself or being religious. But right, when we have poor in spirit, right, thorns for crowns, the meek, sins, martyrs, righteousness, blasphemed, right? It's hell. So we're obviously going like heavy on the religion, and that can be okay, right? You are correct, the Sleepy Librarian, in saying this is not a poem with religious touches, with a flair of religion. It is a very religiously involved piece. I'm on the most boring reading right now. You're reading a whole dictionary. That's impressive, Ray. That's actually fascinating. I think all the time about C.S. Lewis quote, that the greatest evils are not done in darkened alleys. They're committed in well-lit, warm rooms by well-clothed men with neatly clipped fingernails. Yeah, and that's very true and an excellent quote. I like C.S. Lewis a lot. I think it's sort of fascinating how interesting that you bring that up during this poem, because he is very religious, right? He at least used a lot of Christianity in his work, but also, based a lot of the time. So we've really dug into this first stanza, right? Really deeply. But haven't necessarily talked about anything else. And I think it's a good opportunity to zoom out a little bit and maybe come back to the whole poem as a piece and, read over the whole work another time or two more times just to, like, now we've established who our characters are in some sense. The rich, the trodden down, the wealthy, the not, um, the martyrs and the murderers, right? This is our contrast. This is our sort of duality. So now we can frame the rest of this poem within that understanding a little bit. So this is In Lieu of Flowers, which is a fascinating title. I already said that, but like, there are no flowers in this poem, which makes sense, maybe, if it's in lieu of. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright, though trodden down, while wicked, sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. They starve, martyrs, while the heroes burn. Feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Hell's gaping maw it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside. Lives of comfort, lives of ease, their reward they have received. And this Undying, right, this very strongly evokes that same kind of quote, right, that you think of all the time. The monstrous people are those living in comfort, the wealthy, right, well-clothed, warm rooms. Mourn not evil when judgment comes, for your children they'd have none. Turn hearts toward the low instead, and with bare feet on vipers tread. And we have like a very contemporary sort of political statement happening here, right? On vipers tread, definitely strongly evokes the don't tread on me, right? The line invoked by, it's the flag, basically represents libertarianism, right? The free market, unregulated pursuit of wealth and power, right? This sort of version of the American dream, and so we flip that and we say, this definitely frames then these people as vipers. It frames them as the sinful, those who should be trodden on. And I love, right, we have tread at the end, to tread on those who, right, tread on us. We have this treading connection from beginning to end, which does create a really nice full circle kind of connection in this poem. And I am a sucker for a full circle, always. And within that, with words, and maybe this is time also to like go look at these references down at the bottom, because this creates a double meaning, right? Luke 10:19, behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions, right? So we have this, reframing, like you said, Undying, of the religious, of the biblical message, right? Which says to tread on, to trample on serpents, right? To take that action to sort of like destroy sin. The serpent is a representation of sin in the Bible, the Garden of Eden, Satan the snake, right? It's so fascinating to me, the contrast between the don't tread on me movement and scripture that says the righteous will be able to tread on snakes without fear. Yeah, it's such a powerful like calling out of this contradiction, right? To say like, me, I am the snake. I am, uh, you know, powerful and independent on my own, and I should have the freedoms to do as I wish, right? And to, essentially the unspoken part, tread on whoever I wish, right? I, the libertarian, should have my personal power to do as I want. And then you very astutely connect that to the snake, the Bible, this command, not command, behold, I give you the authority, this ability, right, to tread on the oppressor, to destroy sort of sin. Although we've framed sin here as the wealthy, we've framed sin as those who have, which is entirely consistent with like how the Bible describes sin and all of that stuff. It's just that like the modern American, wealthy American, libertarian, don't tread on me type, who often claims they are Christian, has this sort of strange and perverse backwards interpretation. And I think, I think art always has this capability to call out contradictions and to point out these things that others seem to blind themselves to, right? And I think in doing this, you really do, like, it's an excellent thing that you've noticed, right? And I like to think about poetry as noticing things and bringing things to light, putting things on the page that haven't been noticed or that seem to go unnoticed by others. And this in a religious, political, whatever you want to say, socio-political sense, very astutely notices a contradiction. So that's very cool. So as for this like structure thing, this unsteadiness, which is maybe an additionally compelling word to use to describe these lines when we're talking about treading, right? This idea of like steps in the ground and steadiness and like treading without fear, as you say. I don't know how I started that sentence or where that was going. So we make ourselves unsteady by like going from the poor in spirit, the thorns for crowns, to the wicked and sickly, grins. And then this sort of acts as a transition, right? This acts as a transition from here, this takes us to here, where now we're talking about they, right? We go from us to the grins to the they, right? And this is sort of the transition that crosses the fundamental bridge that happens when we create an us, right? Anytime we create an us, we create a them. And this is why it's, I think, as important to sometimes avoid creating us's as it is to avoid creating thems in life. That being said, there are many other people who create us's that forcefully create thems, and when you are the them that is downtrodden and oppressed, it is usually good to unite together under that them or that us, whatever. So we transition, right, from the us to the specific other, and then to the group of them, which then sort of, I think, casts all of these later lines with the uncertainty that we establish in the wow, wicked, sickly grins part. And I think that's cool, right? Anytime that we're talking about this them, it is now calling back to this thing. I think that works, right? They starve martyrs while the heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Right? Hell's gaping maw, it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside. Lives of comfort, lives of ease, their reward they have received. Right, so this whole time, these two lines act as almost a heading for the rest of this, which is kind of cool. I dig that. I wonder if this could be like one big stanza, right? I'm not, maybe not. I don't know. Like it could be interesting structurally to have the 4 lines here, the transition into this stanza where both of these are talking about them, and then like stanza break because now we're coming back to your, and like this is one of the major tonal shifts of the poem, is that we're going from right us to them to like us again, because this you, right, your children they'd have none, it's referring to people within this us group that we established at the start. That's just an idea. I don't know if that would be better, but I do think it might particularly capitalize on this sort of longer line situation that we do in the poem. That, right. So all that being said, I think those long lines work, right? One of what you originally asked is, do they flow well with the poem? Do they feel like they fit, right? That's often a flow kind of thing. And yeah, and they certainly flow on their own as lines, and they work very well in themselves. And I think the way that they flow works with the rest of the poem. And then the way that they don't flow, right, it seems to contribute to like the contrast we're creating. So I like that. As a fellow rhymer, I do appreciate the consistency. Random, I know. No, I mean that's the consistent rhyming is nice, and when it works well. And I think the fact that, these lines are longer, but they carry the rhyme scheme does help us, have the feeling that they flow within the rest of what's going on. So that's at least my thoughts on the flow. The other question was the religion part, and I think there's also a lot to talk about there. So we can maybe switch in that direction. It makes sense. The first 2 lines are us, and the very last lines are us again, with them in between. Yeah, and I think that even itself is an excellent statement, a structural statement that sort of, us, them, us, where the presence of them serves to divide us, right, and keep us separate from each other. Right, that those it's then like a nice kind of subtle move, which is kind of cool. And there are maybe a few ways to like mess with that formatting. You could have a couplet, and then this could be attached here, right? I mean, you could have a couplet then 10 lines, or you could have a couplet 6-4-4. You'd have a couplet 6-5-3, could even work. You could mess with those divisions. You could probably do all sorts of other formatting things to help get those lines across. Lots of options. But that's for you to play with. I do like the idea of creating an us separated by a them, sort of structurally. It's clever, right? in the first lines, the us are weak, and in the last lines, they are empowered, right? Yeah, so then not only is it showing us this like divide that's created, right? It's also showing a linear feeling of progress. And either way, the poem shows a linear progress, that we've gone from, this poor and downtrodden to and with bare feet on viper's tread, right? To go confidently into resistance against these powers. And it is a great like linear message. It maybe even speaks to the fact that with knowledge of this, with the understanding that this is the situation, I guess like, I don't know, to use a Marxist phrase, like once you achieve sort of class consciousness through this middle part of recognizing the contradiction, when you recognize the contradiction of capitalist society, you become empowered to resist that structure, right? There's my 2-sentence Marxist analysis of this poem. I've not read Marx. I've read a little bit of Marx. I would like to read Kapital, but I haven't. Yeah, I think it works. I think there's a lot of ways to structure this poem to lean into one or another of those ideas, right? I think we can make it very clear by like couplet, everything else together in some way, or like couplet six couplet could kind of work, right? Those are ideas. Maybe begin and end with a couplet to really drive in the divide. Yeah, like definitely if it looks like if the poem looks like, oh, here's our 2 lines, and then let me do this better, right? We have our 2 lines, big break with these longer lines, and then some stuff here. And then maybe we can have another here since we're expanding on this. It's funny how that made a shape. And then 2 lines, right? Where we have something short, contrast to show we're in a different direction, continuation of the same, which I didn't draw well, to show that we're continuing under this like, quote unquote heading here, and then couplet to return. This could be a stanza break. This could not be a stanza break. That's interesting. Those are cool thoughts. I do think it works as is, right? We've picked up on all of these dynamics in the 4-line stanzas in this quatrain structure. So we don't necessarily need it, right? Because we've already picked up on the idea. So it's been effective in communicating that. It's just a question of whether we would want to lean into that further. I think some reading on liberation theology has certainly colored my thinking. Yeah, I really love, I haven't read liberation theology, but, these ideas of, like a sort of Christ-like life being that looks very much like what a modern day anarchist is doing in mutual aid organizations to give back to their community, that sort of like resistance against the oppressor. I think those things are very compelling as well. So, religion, right? Liberation theology. the contradictions happening here, and the question of, is this poem too religious? Right? Is this poem too religious? Does it seem too on the nose? Does it hit too hard? There's also this other Bible reference down here, right? Matthew 6:2. When you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you. As the hypocrites do that, they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. So their reward they have received is a direct quote. And that is saying, right, when you give to the needy, no trumpet sounds before you. No one praises those often who are like truly doing the work, giving back, supporting community, creating these positive systems. As the hypocrites do that, they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. Sorry, sound no trumpet before you. Okay, my bad, I misread this. I misread this. When you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you. So call no attention. You should not be like calling to the fact that you were doing good, that you were saving the world. It is hypocritical, right, to do good and then like seek the praise, because the good should be inherently a good thing to do, right? Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. And I think that is to say, right, the hypocrites have received a reward that is not. I would like to see the verse in its larger context. I'm curious of like your particular interpretation of this verse, Mr. Aegis. But there are a few readings of this, right? Like the needy have received their reward, and so like there is no need for anything else. You have received your reward by doing good, and anything beyond that is hypocritical. Or the hypocrites have received their reward in praise because it is false praise, and that is just a demonstration of their own hypocrisy. And I'm not exactly sure, like maybe the most Christian proper reading, textual reading of that, probably because I don't have the rest of the context of Matthew 6 happening here. But either way, right, this is speaking to like that we should be humble as we give, turn the hearts toward the low, right, not to be hypocritical, all of that. And there are other Bible references in here, I think, right? Thorns for crowns, we could specifically point to the verse in any of the synoptic gospels, any of the gospels, with Jesus having, crown of thorns, the meek and the mighty, we very much could like cite the Beatitudes if we wanted to. So we have a lot of religion, and so the question is this too much? Which is a reasonable question. Hi, the Hidden Scotty. Welcome in. I also pretty much only write in 4-sentence stanzas. I should really try to play around with the layout. Yeah, Sleepy Librarian. Playing around with structure is always fun. In this context, he's referring to wealthy scribes who make a big show of their giving. Oh, okay. I think I remember this part of the Bible. Yeah. Which is just a small portion, and they do it for praise and to be seen as righteous. Is this where afterward? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's related to the poor widow giving the 2 coins she has, being far more righteous. Yeah, the following verse, right, is it is more righteous, more true for the poor person giving her 2 coins, which is all she has, rather than, the scribe making a big show of giving gold and silver when really only that's a fraction of what he has. Yeah. Because in that way, the poor widow is truly sacrificing, right? And there is like some amount of nobility here, back to the poem, in the low giving to the low, and those who are, quote, less, supporting each other, maybe in community, and resisting against, the strong and wealthy. Yeah, this makes sense. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Also, you have a fairly large anarcho-Christian tattoo with an alpha and omega symbol forming an anarchy A, with the magnificat in Latin around it. That's super dope. You're cool. I mean, I knew you were cool, Aegis, but that's super dope. Is it religious inherently because it is moral advice and inherently benevolent? Or is it just good advice no matter what? I mean, does someone from another religion receiving that advice would benefit from it? Or is it contained in the fellowship of that religion? Is the right question about it, I think. Yeah, I mean, so when we are, you say a lot here, Leon, and I guess, so you say, is it religious inherently because it is moral advice? And to that, certainly no, right? This poem has this sort of moral stance. It even like has this 2-line like sum up like moral of the story at the end. That is not what is making this poem religious, right? Religious, moral advice can just be moral advice. However, right, this poem is calling specifically to all sorts of religious things, but I think it does that for a very important reason, right? If we just wanted to give moral advice, we wouldn't have to speak to religion. We might not want to speak to religion because a lot of people are turned off by it, right? A lot of people would see, oh, this poem is like kind of Jesus-y. I don't know if I want to read this, right? But in this case, the religion is serving the important purpose of specifically calling out the hypocrisy of a certain group of people, right? This is a call out for the, modern American libertarian, don't tread on me. Let me see if I can get this snake going. Right, these don't tread on me, right? It's calling out these people who are like libertarian and want like wealth and all of that, who also seem to like invoke the same words of the Bible to absolve themselves. So it's comparing, right, the modern American business person, the modern American, capitalist, to the specific, these scribes in the Bible, comparing them to, calling them drenched in golden sins, and comparing the regular common man to the righteous, to those who Jesus truly speaks to. And I will say, like, without the religious part, without this being extremely religious, you don't as well, like I think the religion does something very important, where it's calling out the hypocrisy. Like, without the religion, the hypocrisy isn't clear, of these, modern wealthy people, right? Because it is often these wealthy white American individuals who claim to be, God-fearing men or whatever, right? And they use that probably to wash themselves of sin, right? To feel justified in what they do. Because there is this whole, like, America wealth church and state thing connection that happens, right? And this is undeniable. That like sort of the Christian influence is very strong in this country among the wealthy. So if we were less religious, we would just have like basically a straight up like class thing going on of like the poor are trodden down and the rich are rich, and that's bad, right? But I think like the religion allows for this incredibly dense like snake, viper, rattlesnake, libertarian, double meaning, right? It creates a lot of clever things. So it is very useful here. Most, if not all, religious advice can also be seen as generally good and moral advice. Yeah, lots of religions have good stuff. He will cast down the mighty. He will lift up the lowly. He will fill the hungry and send the rich away empty. Is from the Magnificat section of Luke. Gotcha. Okay. That's awesome. That's dope. I think that answers it. You said, is it too religious? But religion in it doesn't matter as much as you think. Being kind to others, for example, is a core part of Christianity. Benevolence is benevolence. Yeah, but I mean, so I think religion does matter in this layout, right? I think it's very important in this poem. So, right, like what's the situation, right? Like we're talking about just like how I see it, right? We have like wealthy American who claims to be Christian and to be a good like follower of God. And yet they do things that are very not biblical, right? This is like the hypocrisy that the poem is calling out, right? That they are specifically bad Christians. And if they were good Christians, they would be like taking very different actions, right? And then it simultaneously frames like I'll say this is the rich American. So then we have like the common man, right? Within this same Christian framework, that they claim gives them power, right? We are called, right, by their thing to like oppose them, right? So the biblical action is to like get rid of these people. If they were truly following their own religions, they would like destroy themselves, is sort of like the logical framework here. And like, yes, this poem fundamentally maybe is about that it's like bad to be rich, and or like that rich people are bad, or that a system that like has all these wealthy people is really problematic, right? That's the political stance, the economic stance. But I think without the religious part, right, you lose an immense amount of what this poem is doing, right, that this is calling out. I could have said the exact same thing based on my own personal morals or some other religion, and the effect is receiving benevolence. Right, but like, so then the question is this a poem about do good, or is this a poem about call out hypocrisy, right? Hypocrisy. This is like the question that determines whether we think this poem like needs the religion. And to call out the hypocrisy, I think we need the religious thing, because the hypocrisy is the Christian part, right? And, we're even like referencing specifically verses about this wealthy Christian hypocrisy, right? So, so for this poem to do what it's doing, right, the Christian references are beneficial, right? And I think more so the question, right, of is it too religious? Is there too much? Is a question of, does the religion push too far where it feels like tacky or like cliche or like overwrought, right? Is maybe the question we would be asking. I don't think it's a question of whether there should be religion in this poem, because without the religion, this poem is a different poem, is how I read it, right? Especially understanding, right, Mr. Aegis's or Undine's own personal context of like thinking a lot about this, you know, uh, a theological contradiction, these kinds of things. So that's sort of how I read this, right? That it does matter. Definitely seems to remind me of like a more Dante understanding of God. Like, sorta, you should delight in others' suffering rather than feel sympathy because it's God's plan, sort of thing. I have not read Dante. I've actually read the first canto of Inferno, only. Um, um, so, but I think that would be like the framing of the wealthy, right? Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah, they delight in a. That's dope. I need to read that book. Causes the whole thing in Dante's Inferno was him not feeling pity. Yeah, I can't speak to it specifically, but I'm sure there's a that seems like it connects very well to this poem. I just haven't read Inferno, so it makes me a bad poet. Da, 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 da. Not saying this one was too religious, but the references in are definitely obvious enough. Like thorns, crowns, hell's giving maw, judgment comes. So it's fair to say it is religious. Yeah, it's definitely like alluding to religion. Yeah, this poem is absolutely doing that. You could say these exact words, but parts of it would feel off. I think I agree with you, the sleepy librarian here. Yes, but I don't think it matters that much. At least it doesn't to someone like me who, despite not being religious, doesn't have preconceived ideas about religious references. And I think, Leon, if this poem and its moral message of like the rich are bad can be interpreted without a Christian reading of this poem, right? Then the poem is doing something well, right? It is probably a good point that we would like our poem to be interpretable both to the person who is like in the know on the religious references, who can get more value out of it, but then also have it be readable by the person who doesn't, right? And if we read, right, like, poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down, right? We're talking about a group of people who are beaten down. While wicked sickly grins of every soulless prince, I love soulless prince because like Jesus prince kind of thing, beside the point. Send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins, right? This doesn't need to be Christian to read that way. And I think you're right in that it can be interpreted that way, just purely as rich people do bad things. Blah, 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 blah. They do all these atrocities, right? And so we should, like, tread on the viper. And I think maybe the only part of this poem that you need the religious context for is understanding, like, and with bare feet on vipers tread. Because nowhere else in this do we necessarily refer to the wealthy as, right, like snakes, although it is something that maybe we refer to wealthy people as sometimes, or certain people, dishonest people, as snakes. And And snakes are always often, a symbol of bad across cultures because they kill people. Um, but I do think this poem is fairly effective and able to be read outside of its Christian context. But I think that's a good thing, right? Because it means the person who gets it gets more value out of the poem, and the person who doesn't get it can still read the poem and like draw the moral value from it. We could also do a cliche thing, though, like Hell's Gaping Maw. I've definitely read something like that before, and used religion sometimes. And using religion sometimes makes it hard to avoid unoriginal wording. Yeah, I mean like a piece of duh. Yeah, if we're calling to something, if we're alluding to something, if we're making reference to something, we're fundamentally doing something kind of like unoriginal, right? Using someone else's words. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it can get a little tired if we do it too much. I don't think this one does, though. Yeah, that's part of the Chimera quote influence and the when I feed the poor, they call me a saint, if you call attention to your good works. But when I ask why there is poverty, they call me a communist. When I question the structure, they recoil from it. Yeah, it's a great quote, and I think that fits very well in this. Okay, lots of chats. Holding up a mirror to people using their own beliefs is good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an effective thing if they truly engaged with the work. I can see that, but I do think you'd miss parts of the deeper meaning if you try to see it separate from its source. Now, as an atheist who might have some kind of rejection of religious things would probably not like it, but would it matter? Yeah, I mean, these are some really good kind of philosophic questions about this poem. And I think there's like a fundamental question in here about like the value of reference and illusion, which is something I've been thinking about lately, but I'll catch up on chat before we talk about that. I definitely probably wouldn't read this in my own time if I came across it. TBH, we do live in a Judeo-Christian society, so it isn't hard to get most of these religious references because it's so ingrained in our society. Our is in the West, right? We're talking in English here, and I think that's certainly like something on stream that allows for this to probably be mostly understood. I might be naive, but good poetry is good poetry. It's a bit like appreciating classical art, painting, or sculpture. They often link to some religion in some ways, but they're still dope to me no matter the motivations behind it. Yeah, and we should strive to make good poetry no matter what. We should strive to have, a powerful meaning. We should strive to have like a strong use of structure, a strong use of sound. Right, this is important. I agree with that, Leon, and something should like go beyond its original scope. I think that's a very strong indication that something has become like great art. I also think that, references, that illusion, allow us to do something very specific in poetry, right? Whenever we make a reference, whenever we allude to something, we are creating a division in our poem. We're cutting our poem into two groups. And there are people who get it, and there are people who don't get it. Now, I think what you say is very important, Leon, that people who don't get the reference should, maybe, still be able to get the poem, right? We don't always want to alienate our audience, although sometimes it's fine, right? We're totally allowed to write a poem where if you don't get the reference, you don't get the poem, and that's fine. But we shouldn't go expecting people to like understand it. But, right, when someone does get the poem, when they get the reference, sorry, their understanding of the poem increases. They get more value from it. Because I think there is this feeling of like, oh, I got the thing. I got the thing that the author was trying to do, and that's really cool. I connected with them in the same way. And this is like this whole empathetic connection of understanding between me and the author, blah, 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 blah. Right? The reference creates a new way for the reader who understands the reference to engage with the work. And I think this is why, like, using references is powerful. And specifically in this poem, we are referencing a specific kind of person, right? We are calling out someone specific, these hypocrites, right? So if they read this, which they probably never will, unfortunately, but maybe they will, who knows? Someone who's rich and cruel. They might read this and be a Christian and, you know, say like, wow, I understand this reference, and maybe this is referencing me. And like Kathzik said, it can be very useful to hold up a mirror to someone's own beliefs and challenge them. And ideally, right, maybe this poem would give that person a deeper connection, maybe help them understand, maybe like, you know, whatever. You know, this could also help like the person who is Christian, who has grown up in Christian Southern America, reads this poem and is like, oh yeah, someone sees the hypocrisy that I see around me in my life, right? Because it would probably be very troubling for, I don't know, some young kid in Texas to see how hypocritical the people are around them, the Christians around them, and feel like no one sees that hypocrisy, right? Oftentimes art, it allows us to shed light on things that are not otherwise seen. Yeah. I think that's the extent of my thoughts on that. I think other religious backgrounds can also get it. Yeah, absolutely. Snakes are common imagery. Islamic focus on zakat, the necessary charity, right? 5 pillars of Islam. Yeah, I mean, charity is very common in religion, and arguably there are people who are hypocritical in the very same way as this in all religions. And maybe there's another poem there where we're talking about religion in general, and religions that, you know, generally urge people to be generous, right? You've gotten lost in the sauce, Sleepy Librarian. It's okay. I did like say a whole lot of words there. And there have been some really big chat messages. And we're going sort of fast. That being said, right, how do we get you back in the sauce? Because I think we are definitely getting pretty out there in this. We're getting pretty away from the poem. I guess I'm a bit cliche. Illusion is good. But it also isn't hard to just use a synonym to subvert. Yeah, I see. That makes sense. Hidden Scotty. I think we equally have biblical and cultural references too. Even atheists growing up in the West, we are indeed into the cultural thing that's born out of Christian society. More so than Judeo, by the way. Yeah, Judeo-Christian's an odd word, right? With Judaism being like such a minority religion. So it might be more cultural than religious in a way. Yeah. One thing I forgot to note, in lieu of flowers is meant to connect with mourn not evil when judgment comes. That is when evil people die. We're expected to be considerate and not speak ill or talk about their evil. I posit in the poem, in lieu of giving these people flowers, we reject that mourning instead and use it as a reason to question those people and resist them. That's an excellent title. Um, I like that explanation. I was gonna go back to that and kind of think about it because I hadn't quite put it together, but I do like that meaning a lot. I think that's powerful. Yeah, I grew up in a far-right evangelical fundamentalist borderline cultish community, so the religious symbolism is heavily ingrained in me despite rejecting it. Yeah, and like I use a ton of Christian symbolism because of like my education at a Christian high school. And those things are hard to escape. Um, I would also imagine that like a poem like this, Mr. Aegis, um, would have probably been like a very reassuring thing to the young you, um, growing up in like a far right evangelical sphere. Um, and I think that's cool. Like I could definitely conceptualize of a young person in that situation reading something like this and finding it helpful, you know. Also, as a non-American, half these terms don't mean shit to me, or I'm just not tapped in with the religious terms. Oh, yeah, that's definitely hard. And that's the thing, right? If, um, right, like we're talking about very specific religious, cultural references, like um, these sort of contexts. And so this analysis is naturally going to be um, less right. We're sort of doing a very cultural analysis of this poem. We're talking about the American context of this, so not being part of that probably is makes that harder to follow. The Judeo part I think is a reference to the shared history. Yeah, I mean, like they're Abrahamic, but like I mean it probably like I don't know, it's probably like an Israel thing, really. Um because of this like really this political connection between Israel and America that allows for the sort of colonial domination and destabilization of the Middle East, right? Because if we were going to do that, like we would really want to say Abrahamic, but the West is not Abrahamic because the West hates Islam, um, which so I think it's really probably a political tool to exclude Islam from Abrahamic and to um, show Western solidarity with Israel and um, kill people who don't look like us, right? Um, that would be my guess of why Judeo is there. Unfortunately, hi, dew on the grass. um, yeah, I don't know. Apparently, it was used in the Cold War to refer to a united American identity against communism. Huh. I mean, that makes sense too, right? And a solidarity with victims of the Holocaust. That makes sense too. Yeah, right. The state of it. Yeah, I mean, Cold War. That's when Israel was being established, and all that stuff. Um, anyway, I think we've gone to the full. I guess people forgot that communism is born from Jewish brains. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's so much going on at that point, and I mean it's big political historical context there, but that is definitely us getting very very far away from the text, right? Very very far away from the poem, And I think maybe there are like still a couple things to say about this work. Um, and we'll come back to it with like fresh eyes and sort of um, pull away from the whole historical thing by taking a quick 3-minute break to sort of give us a chance to come back to the poem with fresh eyes. I do think the political conversation is important. I do think the messy conversation is a really crucial one to have. Um, uh, but it's also hard to do so on a Twitch stream, and I want to keep it within the scope of the poem, right? So we'll be back in just a few minutes. I will drink some water. I will go to the bathroom. Stand up from your computers, move, rest the brain, move the body, right? These are going to be good for you in many ways. Be right back. Hello. Welcome back. Um, we are still we're still reading or talking about In Lieu of Flowers, um, and hopefully returning to the text. Uh, yeah. Ba 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 ba. Wait, whose poem was this? On first read, it felt very similar to my own Nachtwacht, but with a perspective shift that resulted in a new tone. Ginny, could you teach us about comparative analysis of poetry? That would be quite the shift of tone for what we're doing, right? This is a cool poem. It is a cool poem. So this is a poem by Mr. Aegis or Undyne to Tale, depending on which username and account. Hello again. Did you have a drink? I did have a drink, but I can drink more water. I left my water bottle over there during the break. I'll be back. Okay. Water. Okay. So. Could you teach us about comparative analysis of poetry? That's sort of an interesting question. Because I think comparative analysis is extremely useful when you have two poems talking about similar things, or maybe two poems talking about the same thing that are coming from different perspectives, or two poems in a similar style but talking about different things, right? Laying a modern sonnet and an old sonnet next to each other. But I think usually the useful thing about comparing is often saying these two things share a similarity, right? They share a similarity of form, they share a similarity of content, they share a similarity of structure, they share a similarity of style, period. Those are all things. But, right, these two poems do something different. And then it allows you to, like, look at, how the similar part gets reframed when you do something different. And I think that's a cool thing about comparison. I don't think I'm going to bring your poem entirely into this one and do something comparative. I do think it would be fun sometime to do some streams that are like, we are going to talk about two poems and do an analysis that is specifically comparative. But I think it needs to be a little more planned out. I like the writing in this one as a change of pace from my usual work, which is often more introspective, reflective, and more personal. Nature, symbolism, navel gazing. Yeah, your work definitely, from what I've read so far, has been very internal, has been more philosophical, has been more slow, contemplative, right? And this one definitely does lean political. It looks outward. It looks toward specific morality, specific groups of people, specific institutions. So I think it is a lovely kind of change of pace from what you normally do, right? And that's good. That's good. So here again is In Lieu of Flowers. I'm not actually sure how much more I have to say about it, but the break was coming. We'll see. I'll give it a few honest reads, though, to see if I notice anything else that's exciting. In Lieu of Flowers. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright though trodden down, while wicked, sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. They starve martyrs, while the heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Hell's gaping maw, it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside, lives of comfort, lives of ease. Their reward they have received. Mourn not evil when judgment comes, for your children they'd have none. Turn hearts toward the low instead, and with bare feet on vipers tread. Good sounds in this. Starve and martyrs. Yeah, they starve martyrs while heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables, right? Martyrs starve. Lust to rule by might, cloak themselves in blasphemed. Hell's gaping maw opens wide. We have like maw, monstrous, right? Monstrous men. Lives of comfort, lives of ease, their reward they have received. I really love this is such a standout 2 lines for me. This like soulless prince, open golden sins, like kind of everything going on here. Right, sickly every meek. Yeah, I like it a lot, the sound. Like every time I read this, for me it's the density of like literary techniques happening in these 3rd and 4th lines that really just like jumps out to me. And I think that's great, right? I think it really does communicate like it shows us to pay attention there, right? If nothing else, it says pay attention to these lines. Look at them. They're really cool. They're doing something. And when we dig into them, it is that establishment of who this adversary It's this establishment of the rich, the wealthy, the cruel as those who are the real topic of this poem, right? And I think that works really effectively. But I've already said that. I already talked about that for a long time. But it's good. And I mean, we have at the end, I don't think I necessarily talked about like the cool sound stuff happening here, but like, we have the mourn and the your, the for your mourn, when and children when, sort of, right? Turn hearts toward the low with bare feet. And we have this whoa kind of thing going on. There's cool stuff, right? There's definitely a lot of cool sound. I agree, Kathzik. I dig it a lot. I was just saying that and about to type it. The mourn for your thing. I beat you. Yeah. And I mean, that's awesome, right? That we can kind of see the same thing and appreciate the same thing. As someone who wouldn't call himself religious, this does make me curious to look into what this is about and fully understand the divide. Yeah, and maybe, I don't know if Mr. Aegis you have for the Sleepy Librarian, further reading that specifically speaks to the American political, kind of climate of evangelical Christianity and conservatism being aligned with like capitalism and like the Heritage Foundation and all of these like really messy interconnected parts of American politics. I feel like I've learned a lot of it personally, the Sleepy Librarian, through just a lot of like probably just ambient context, right? Like being American and being left-leaning, very left, actually, not leaning. I am very left. Okay, liberation theology, a primer. Now you have a place to start. I'm really glad you have that to share, Mr. Aegis. I mean, you're a teacher. It makes sense. Because poetry, right, is very often didactic, right? This is one of my favorite words didactic, or that it is a teaching tool, right? This is how things have been as long as we've been telling stories as humans, and poetry is a story we tell. It's a different way to tell a story, but it's still a story. We tell stories to entertain, right? We tell stories to teach. We tell stories to caution, right? But this idea of teaching is extremely big in storytelling, and poetry can do this too. Where if we see something that we don't know in poetry, like in this case, this sort of idea of the American evangelical political situation. That's totally misspelled. I don't care. Wow. Evangelical. Dude, I just like. Anyway, this poem serves to like show that there's something happening here, and maybe point someone toward wanting to learn more. Now, this poem isn't like specifically teaching about those things. It's not like laying out sort of journalistically what's going on. But I think it's really reassuring that this might open up the possibility for some people to learn about this or learn that this is a thing. I don't think American Republicans or even Mormons are very deep into it, are very far from Christian traditional values. I mean, if Jesus came back, he would absolutely be a socialist. Yes, that's true, and I think that's what this poem is speaking to, right? That the American Christian, the American Mormon, Republican, and Republicans are not all Christians, I'll be very clear there. But the American Christian is very far away from the, I won't say traditional, but I will say the textual Christian value, and these like things taught in the Bible itself, right? However, American Christian traditional values, and you'll often see American Christians using phraseology such as, family values. This usually means, right, disempowering women, especially within like extreme Christian traditions in America, like Mormonism, like evangelical South, these kinds of things. You see things like homophobia, transphobia, just general, all of that. You see like the anti-Semitism, right? These kinds of things. So I think it is important to note that when I talk about Christianity, the Christianity I'm referring to, and that this poem is referring to, well, it's referring to two different Christianities, and this is like the core of it. The American Christianity, the American Jesus, if y'all want a good song, American Jesus by Bad Religion, which is, kind of similar to this. There's the American Christianity. There is the the white Jesus. There is the, justification for the repression of women. There's the Jesus that justifies slavery. There's the KKK Christianity, basically, right? Which is not all of modern Christianity. There are like good Christian people in modern America. But that is because this is contrasted against the textual Christianity, the kind, the giving, the faithful Christianity. And I have like many friends who are very Christian and very kind. Because, they're not, right, Christian nationalists. Anti-Semitism is a loaded word nowadays. I mean, there's... Anti-Semitism is really hard because like there are Jewish people who struggle with anti-Semitism and being opposed to the state of Israel and their genocide does not necessarily mean hating Jewish people, right? Christianity spread so effectively because it was adapted to whatever paganism or folklore already existed in the area. Oh, they're colonizing. Okay, Christianity is a religion of colonizing now. Um, and I think that's very true. That's a very important historical context. Um, yeah, I mean the timings of different holidays, Christmas, Easter, all of that, very true. The new pope is saying some stuff that is absolutely driving them crazy. I'm not surprised. I haven't been following. What is his name? Pope Leo? Is he a Pope Leo? Is that the current pope? I'm not sure. Um, Leo the 14th. Thank you. I like that chat knows more things than me. I think that's really nice. Yeah, like it's a hive mind. It's really cool. I maybe sometimes maybe I mean sometimes y'all probably feed me bad information. I can't trust all of you, but Leo the 14th, and he's like a White Sox fan or something. That's what I know about him basically. Then he likes baseball. Okay, so what were we talking about? We were talking about religion and family values and Christianity. Didactic, right? Who knows if that's the right number? Yeah, I mean it's not gonna kill us if he's actually the 15th. We're not gonna go to hell or whatever. So I was talking about things that are didactic and poetry being a tool of teaching. And I think when I have time, something that's always valuable to discuss with these poetry analyses is what can we learn from this poem in particular, right? Most of us in chat, although we don't all have to be, right? Most of us are poets, or writers, or artists, right? We don't all have to be poets. And whenever we read something, there's almost always something this poem does that we've never done, or something this poem does that's interesting, that's unique, that can, teach us something to take away in our own art. And I always forget this part when I'm analyzing, but I think it is a very important thing to talk about, right? And I mean, most of what we talked about today on stream for this poem was this idea of, I mean, this poem is a moral work, I would say, right? This poem is, I mean, it even comes from, as Undine said, the tradition of liberation theology, I think is the phrase that you used. This and that means theology. This is a poem of resistance, right? This is a political poem, which I would say often any moral work is almost always going to be a political work. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but like politics is morality at scale, kind of. I mean, ideally, ideally politics involves morality, right? In the governing of people. But I think that's what this poem does. That's like the big thing. That's very, impressive, and that we would want to like pay attention to. And I think, what this poem is doing, as Kathzik said, I really like the observation that Kathzik made earlier of this poem holds a mirror up to people's own beliefs or something like that, right? Where we're pointing out the hypocrisy by showing this thing that people arguably believe in, and showing the contradiction. And I think, this concept can speak to any moral thing, any political thing, any whatever, right? And that is maybe something we can take away in our own work, right? I would invite everyone to try to write a poem that does this, or to do something like that. I also think we talked about structure, right? And I don't think most of the people were here when we were talking about it, but we were discussing the placement of these stanzas and where they could go, um, and that, you know, the structure of these longer lines of these things feeling more drawn out, more unsteady, right, can create specific feelings that contribute to the work. I think that's an important thing, an impressive thing that this poem does as well, that I really enjoyed. So those are maybe like two takeaways, right? To resist by holding up a mirror, to resist by holding up a mirror, to resist by pointing out hypocrisy, and then also that on a more poetic level, the structural choices we make can impact how the poem reads or works, right? The form is impressive to me. With the rhymes, they feel very natural, right? Yeah, we have this momentum, which definitely feels an ancient inheritance with religious poems. Yeah, always got great rhymes because they're usually songs. That's true. It does call to that sort of structured, sort of verse like thing, which does emerge from a religious tradition. That's a really good observation. Liberation theology about preventing earthly suffering. Dope. It structures like a hymn. Yeah, it kind of is. I was going to say that with the consistent AABB rhyming, I don't feel the forcing of the rhyme adding a word merely because it rhymes with the last. Nice. Yeah, hymn-like. I think that's awesome. Comrade Eric, you say, I want to write more poetry, but I find it hard to actually sit down and do it. How do you go about it? Is it about the discipline of sitting down and thinking? Is it about inspiration or something else? I will answer that question once we wrap up this poem. It's a great question and one that I love to talk about. I will also, when I put my face back on screen so we can see the flags, I will talk about those too, Leon. Remind me though. Yeah. So I think that's really all I have to say about In Lieu of Flowers. Unless there are any other specific questions or thoughts from you, Mr. Aegis. But really, thank you for sending your work. As always, it's an incredibly courageous thing to share your poetry online for a bunch of people to see. I really appreciate that you've entrusted your words with me for the last hour 45, 2 hours, something like that. That means a lot to me. And if there are no other questions or comments, we'll read the poem a final time, right? And then I will answer those 2 questions from before, just that those are outside of the scope of this poem. So, yeah. Thank you. A wonderful analysis and time, and thanks to all the other comments. Yes, and thank you, truly, thank you for sending this. In Lieu of Flowers by Mr. Aegis, by Undyne Tale. Poor in spirit, thorns for crowns, our faces bright, though trodden down, while wicked, sickly grins of every soulless prince send the meek to open graves while drenched in golden sins. They starve martyrs while the heroes burn, feign righteousness when tables turn. They who lust to rule by might cloak themselves in blasphemed light. Hell's gaping maw, it opens wide, receives these monstrous men inside. Lives of comfort, lives of ease. Their reward they have received. Mourn not evil when judgment comes. For your children, they'd have none. Turn hearts toward the low instead, and with bare feet on vipers tread. In Lieu of Flowers by Undyne Your Tale. Thank you. Thank you so much for sending this. I really appreciate it. It's dope. Yeah. Thank you. So, questions, the two questions from before. I will start with the easy question that is flags on my wall. Trans flag. Trans. Polyamory flag, but the new one that was maybe designed sometime in the 2000s instead of the bad polyamory flag with the gross colors and the pie symbol on it. Except I'm not polyamorous, but I used to think I was. I think I was just down bad in college, I would say, to use a tamer word. But polyamory is like, it's cool. I guess for those who are not aware, that's like multiple people loving, not just like a two person marriage kind of arrangement. I know lots of cool polyamory people, and I think polyamory sometimes gets shit on a lot, so I keep the flag up. That's an Indian flag. I used to be a Buddhist. Now I'm not a Buddhist. I think if you're calling yourself a Buddhist, you might be attached to the path. I still am very influenced by Buddhism and Eastern thought. I mean, we opened today's poem with today's stream with a poem by Basho. I read the Tao often. I love Zen Buddhism. I meditate sometimes. And I still do yoga a lot. But for a while, I wanted to go to India and be a translator and learn like Hindi and Pali and be super into that stuff, and then it sort of fell apart. So these flags are memories. This flag is something that I have a very like specific kind of definition of what trans is, and doesn't always fit in what a lot of people think, but I have it on my wall because I'm not a man. I don't think I'm a woman though. Okay, so to your question, Comrade Eric, I want to write more poetry, but I find it hard to actually sit down and do it. How do you go about it? Is it about the discipline of sitting down and thinking? Is it about inspiration or something else? So, yes, do. Very funny message. The if you meet the image and kill the image on. Love that. So, inspiration. How does it happen? How do we write? Right? Like, it's hard. And I think we see online all these people talking about their like writing routines, and then there are these novelists who talk about how they wrote like 1,500 or 5,000 words today, and you're like, man, I don't do that. Am I writing enough? And these are valid questions to ask, right? Stephen King makes me feel like a bad writer every day. Right. And my advice, right? I have a lot of advices about this. A lot of advices. One is, like you say, comrade, it's different for everyone. And we're all different people. We all have different minds. We all have different schedules, obligations, just amounts of creativity or emotion within us, different things we want to write. And so the fundamental thing is, like you say, helping you find your own approach. Because for some people the schedule does work. For some people it's wake up and do the morning pages, right? For some people it's wake up and write a poem. For some people it's an evening walk where you go and write. For some people like me, it is always having my notebook, my little pocket notebook, this guy, and a pen, no matter where I am, so that if poetic inspiration comes, I can write it down, right? It's different for everyone. But just saying that doesn't necessarily help you, because that doesn't get you to find your your own process. And so then there are a few thoughts on how we find our process, right? One is maybe like another disclaimer, just that it will take time, right? Because you're gonna like experiment with different things, and like something might work for a while and then it might stop working, and then you might like some other approach, and then you might get really busy and that approach doesn't work anymore. You might like structure for 6 months and then you might not. And sometimes, that's just the process toward getting to something consistent. I think for some people, there also may never be a consistent process that comes for writing. So you may end up just always changing in your writing process. You may be striving towards something consistent that is your routine. And that means, so too, no routine is a routine, and having a routine is a routine. These are both viable options. But something that's important to know, right, is what do you want, right? Is there an amount of poetry you want to be writing, or a certain amount of emotional investment you want to have into your work, or do you want to be, having a consistent daily routine? Because, like, let's say your goal, I don't know if this is a good goal, but let's say your goal is to write a poem every day, and this is like your routine. This is like just what you're setting out to do. Wouldn't recommend it. Then you're probably going to want a routine for that, to like always sit down and do it every day, and it's in the schedule, right? But you might not want to write something every day. And for me, right, personally, the thing that I think I want out of my poetry is just for me, it is that there's a lot of beauty in the world, and there's a lot of things to notice, and there is so much that gets lost in life when we are moving really fast and sort of not paying attention. So for me, the purpose of my poetry is to slow down, to pay attention, so that when I notice a beautiful little flower, I can sit and write about it. When I notice the specific way that the city sounds, I can stop and write about it. When I notice that I'm feeling something, I have a space to slow down, to consider that. That is my goal in poetry, right? And that is, your goals do not have to be write a poetry collection. Your goals do not have to be write an award-winning poem or write this number of poems. But I think it can be important to have an idea of like why you're writing, or like what is what's the end here, because that can uh, help you with like what is the right routine, right? So let's say your goal is just to vent all the horrible emotions that you have. Um, Not saying that you have horrible emotions, comrade, but like, let's say you have a really hard life, hypothetical, and poetry is the thing that lets you like vent and dump it all out. Having a strict routine might create a very problematic relationship with poetry for you, right? Because maybe there aren't always these bad emotions and you end up like putting yourself in a vulnerable space when you don't need to, right? So routine is about, finding what works for you. And I think there are a lot of like metrics that we can use to maybe describe lots of routines that people have. Some people are very structured and consistent. Some people are a poem a day or always following prompts or these kinds of things. Some people like me are right when the writing happens, right? And these are like, ends of a scale. We can be somewhere in between, right? You can have like a few writing days a week, or you can, whatever, right? You can have like, this is structure, right? My notebook is structure. It's a place that I always have to write. And that's maybe even more structured than some people's routines. Um, so you have like structure and frequency, and you have like maybe even how long you're spending on an individual poem. You can try like, I'm going to change my approach to spend a lot of time on one individual poem and write like one poem a month, but it's going to be really good because you're going to work on it all month. Or you can basically never edit your poems and just throw them down on the page in the moment and then they're done. That's how I do it, right? But I think when you're looking for your own personal writing practice, you can experiment, right? Oh, I feel like I've been writing a lot. I've been very structured. What if I try an unstructured approach and see if it feels better? Also, really listening. If you're sitting down to write and it's like causing you grief and it's unpleasant and you're not like enjoying it, like these are signs that your routine is maybe not doing good things for you. If you feel burnt out, if you notice that you're following cycles of like writing a lot, burning out, writing a lot, burning out, and having like a tumultuous relationship with yourself and your writing, this might be a sign to change. And oftentimes, like the only way we can know anything, I mean, this is like Socrates, is through like sort of the negation of things. We try something and it doesn't really work, so we stop doing that, right? And we try something else and it doesn't really work, and we stop doing that. And like for some people, like the routine is just whatever it is when you stop trying to force yourself. But you know, I'm saying a lot of meandering words. Um, those are some thoughts, right? So so Lol, you just got described with the writing spurts. And okay, it's okay to have a time, like let's say you spend 2 weeks writing a ton and you spend 2 weeks not writing. That is okay, right? But if those 2 weeks are spent miserable and depressed because you're not writing and you're burnt out and you hate yourself, or if it's 2 months and 2 months or 6 months and 6 months, this might be a problematic cycle, right? Um, if you're like causing yourself grief. If you're like comfortable in your on and off kind of pattern, then that's fine, right? Um, um, okay, so y'all said a bunch of things while I was yapping. Um, it's different for everyone. Yes, yes, yes. Snaps for that. Um, Living is research for writing. If you're not writing, it's okay. You're preparing. That's wise. I've written screenplays in my film studies and some poems before, but I haven't really found a consistent process yet. Yeah, and you'll find it. You might find that you don't need it. You might find it in an unexpected way or place, right? Um, I right like my lack of process is a process, and that's not what I would have expected. I had a period where I was writing 2 poems a day for like multiple months, and I like burned myself out a lot. That was bad. um, and it turns out the best process was not having like the structure. Um, I had a period where I kind of forced myself into writing a piece every day or 2 days, and then I got so burned out that I stopped writing for 4 months. Yeah, I had a period. I mean, I had a like streams are part of my whole poetic process, and I had a period where I was streaming like every day of the week, like 7 days a week, and then it like dropped off, and I just entirely stopped. And I think I took a 6 month break from streaming, like basically a year ago, last spring and summer. And it was sad because I wanted to stream, and I knew that I liked streaming and there was value in streaming for me, and I learned things from streaming. But if you push too hard and you force yourself too much, like you can lose that thing that you enjoy, and that's hard. Um, Personally, one of my advices when you're trying to find voice or inspiration is just try automatic writing. Just everything in your mind in the moment and see what you put down and see what inspires you, or black out the meaninglessness or filler words. Yeah, that works for some people. That has never worked for me. But I think it is a great um, technique that I've heard a lot about, right? Do you start the writing by already forming a poem, or do you just kind of just write an outline first and then start making a poem? Yeah, dogs. um, so for me, um, almost always the poem always begins with noticing. Uh, for me, poems emerge from like listening and like perceiving the world. Always. Um, yeah, it's always. Um, and that could be noticing that there's a bunch of bees in a blossoming tree and sitting and listening to the sound of that, right? And wanting to write a poem based on that. That could be looking out the window on the bus ride home. I'm giving you actual examples of when I've written poems. Looking out the window on the bus ride home and seeing my reflection superimposed on a sky that looks like it's bleeding, right? That could be being in the shower and noticing the feeling of cleaning my own body, right? That's the beginning of a poem for me. Uh, or like a set of words, just I'm like thinking, and like sometimes some words just come into my mind and they seem beautiful. Um, and then I'll usually start with a line, like where the first line just happens, or a line happens, and then I build that into the poem. But usually I just start with the first line and I write through, and there's no outline, and it's just a question of, I've written this line. What is the only line that can come after this? Um, what is the next, the thing that naturally follows? So my writing is very emergent. It is not very structured. It is extremely spontaneous. But it might sound like, since, I mean, you're asking forming ideas and outlines. Maybe you're an outline person. Maybe you're a structure person. And like, that's totally cool. You could definitely say, I have this poem that I want to write about this person in my life who I care about and trust. And I want to open with not trusting them, and I want to cut to the present where I now trust them and we are close, and I want to conclude with that middle part where the process of gaining them gaining my trust. um right, that's an outline, and then you could fill in poetically. um I wouldn't write like that, but that's okay, you know. um these are all options. Depends on the poem. Sometimes I have an idea or word I want to build around. I simply think of a concept, write one line, then figure it out. If it leads to nothing, then I save it in some draft note I have. Yeah, so I'm kind of similar to that sleepy librarian. Practice by writing acrostics. It's like a puzzle that engages the word parts. Yeah, you can do puzzles and you can do techniques and you can do prompts. I think that's analogous to a musician practicing their scales, right? I'm also a musician. My saxophone is back there, I think, on screen. There's a piano here, right? When you practice your scales, you're not doing something that's actually like music. Scales are not really music. Music is built on scales. And I've had fun making up tongue twisters to practice alliteration. Um, uh, Doing freestyle poetry, right? Where it's like spoken out in front of people and you just have to get through it. Um, you could practice doing like prompts, right? To push you out of your comfort zone. Um, you can do, you can do crosswords and cryptics and word games, right? Wordle. I think these things actually have their applications in seeing how words work with each other and relate. Um, Reading, of course, is practice, right? Reading out loud, noticing the beauty in the things you read. But arguably, someone said life is the practice for writing. Maybe that was Kasich. You've got bars today. Walking in nature, right? Slowing down, noticing. But again, that's practice for me, because poetry comes from patient noticing, attentiveness, care. So for me, walking in nature is a really great way to practice the sort of poetic impulse, especially because usually when I'm out there, the last thing I want to do is be writing. So I'll sit and I'll notice, and then when I come back to the world that, everyone occupies, I'll be more primed to notice the things around me. I also don't really draft once I write the poem, TBH. It's already a final copy. I'm not a big editor, but editing is totally allowed and a valid poetic process. It doesn't have to come out perfect. TBH, I'm in a good streak though recently. That's good. Also, my girlfriend used to write poetry very often, and recently, since I picked it back up, I noticed she doesn't really write anymore. So I asked why. She simply said, because I'm happy now. I don't need it. So I think that's very important to solidify the why. Damn, yeah, that's beautiful. And I am so happy for her, the sleepy librarian, for your girlfriend, because, yeah, for a lot of people, poetry is a place to put the unhappiness and the trauma and the pain. And, sometimes we don't need that anymore. And if she is hurting again, right, she always has that to go back to. And maybe, and she doesn't, need to write. That's really awesome. And, she also doesn't need to recontextualize poetry as a way to frame happiness now that she's happy. I think that's really healthy. I think that's really special. Um, yeah, that's dope. I'm very happy for her. I don't have much of a process either. It's just life kicking me in the balls all the time, and that makes it hard to write anything, to find time to do it rather. But if I sat in front of a computer with time, I'll always be writing something. Sometimes quite fast, actually. Been known to write 3 or 4 thousand words at a time without much issues. I always had ideas. Yeah, see, like, my poetry process is not life kicking me in the balls until I end up in front of a computer and like dump out a bunch of words. Like, I, you know, but that's valid. That's a way to write, and if it works for you and you're happy with that, then like that's good. The first step I find is picking something that is worth writing to you. When I find something, anything that I want to write for, the process guides itself. The only right answer is yours. Don't force your well dry, but you also can't wait for it to overflow. Yes, you know your well, you built it right. What I'm trying to say is that you just decide to write because you can. Yeah, and sometimes you'll run into things in the world, maybe some news headline or some situation, some injustice, um, where you see that and you say, I have to write about this. That's a good sign. Um, don't force yourself to write about things just because other people seem to write about them, right? All your friends start writing political poetry, decrying whatever. Just because you're not doesn't mean you're bad, right? Um, if you want to still write about nature, that's fine, right? If that's the thing you write about and that's the thing that calls to you, um, in that realm of noticing, to me, I think that it's beneficial to everyone to notice yourself, right? Be attentive to yourself. Pay attention to your own influences or your own impulses, and and like be present within your own mind, cause then you know you'll find um stuff. I'm getting tired. um Sometimes a poem forms in my head, kind of, or like I think of poetic lines in a way, um but I don't write them down. So I'll get better at actually writing it down when it happens and having pen and paper. Yeah, I think particularly like if you if those things are coming into your mind and you sort of miss the fact that you're like, oh man, I should have written that down and now it's gone, the always having pen and paper might be a good thing for you. Um, that could just be a folded up sheet of paper. I don't have them anymore, I don't think, but for a time before I had the notebook, I would take a regular sheet of paper, notebook paper. I would fold it, fold it, fold it, fold it, 4 times, and then it was like this big, probably, little guy, and I would just put it in my pocket, and I would kind of keep unfolding it and writing things down and folding it back up, and that was like my notebook. Um, it doesn't have to be complicated, right? And I don't know if people are gonna like, I don't know, like you're allowed to carry a tattered, folded up piece of paper in your pocket. There's nothing weird about that. I mean, it's weird, but embrace it or whatever. um, definitely embrace being weird as fuck and writing poetry. I've definitely stopped people in conversation. They've said something, and I've been like, "Stop! That was really poetic. I need to write that down." Just, but that might not be you. Um, I edit as I go. That's crazy. I do not. I mean, I kind of edit as I go. I guess maybe edit's a broad term. And I say crazy, but there's no judgment there. um, Me too, though. Slightly sad I don't get any more poems to read of hers. Referring to your girlfriend, yeah. Um, yeah, and maybe in time she'll like write again. If she doesn't matter, right? Um, but yeah, either way, it's good. Life kicking me in the stuff is more a blocker than a reason to write. Sure, I have endless drama to talk about. I could fill books and books. Yeah, um, yeah. There's a lot of things that get in the way of writing, and that's part of the routine. Is like understanding like how do I fit writing into my own life, right, and keep it manageable. Hi, Poyo, welcome. I was at a slam poetry reading a little while ago, and it inspired me to want to write, but I still haven't gotten around to actually write. Being here and hearing the different thoughts and approaches inspires me to actually try. I am so happy for that. Like, really, genuinely. Um, I wish you the best. And however the writing comes out, whether it's poetry, whether it's poetic prose, whether it's something entirely different, whether it's slam or on the page or, whatever, spoken or song, um, you know, I wish, I hope that happens. I love when people write poetry. Uh, oh, by the way, I do think I had a lot of fun with your poem prompt. Yeah, I need to do your prompt. uh, yeah, I did see your prompt. A funny name I just remembered is Esme Gigi Genevieve Squalor. I feel like those are like mostly normal names, personally. And names are important. Um, I'd also like to write songs actually, since I play the guitar. But I'll start with writing before trying to make it musical. Dude, I write so much poetry, and the idea of the poetry turning into lyrics is um like so beyond me. So beyond me. Like it's hard. Um yeah. Um yeah. Would you analyze a monologue if it was sent right now or nah? Just now, JN, just now? Is that what people do? I don't think I'm reading any more poetry today. We spent like a long time on Mr. Aegis's, and I I am tired. Oh, if it was sent in, yeah, I could analyze a monologue like just in general, not right now. I'm fine with. I mean, I know like nothing about theater. I presume you mean like theatrical monologue, and maybe me saying that shows that I'm like not hip to monologues or how those work. Um, but yeah, I'm fine with any written word or spoken word, uh, as long as it's not too long. Too long being too long. you know. um, yeah. SMH, you aren't hip to monologues. I'm sorry. I know. I'm not in with the monologue crowd. Um, it's a real blind spot of mine. um, I am pretty tired. I had a very long weekend. Um, losing viewers by the second. I'm gonna end stream here soon. I think. Yeah, I had a long weekend. For those not used to Imogen stream, those are constant battles between whoever will consume the most energy between Imogen and Imogen's computer. Trust me, one of those will break away in about the same time period. Yeah, the computer's been getting better. I've been trying to keep as many things closed to like have my CPU not get overloaded, and the ice packs are on the computer to keep it cold and in the Las Vegas heat. Um, and the last couple streams I think have gone smoothly, without crashing. Um, roughly, yeah. Actually, been doing good this stream. Yeah, it seems like it's been good. Yes, I have a laptop, so like, um, it doesn't cool well. Ice packs, heat, and electricity. What could go wrong, right? Nothing could possibly go wrong with ice packs. Nothing at all. Um, anyway, that's all for today. um, that's all. Uh, thank you guys for hanging out. Stream might be longer on Wednesday. It might not. Next stream's on Wednesday. Um, thank you all for coming in. Thank you for sharing the poem, Mr. Aegis. Um, thank y'all for the excellent discussions and commentary. Y'all asked good questions, and I think it was a nice little discussion. And keep making art you love is the thing I say when I end the stream. So that's probably the end of this.